Yes, yes. I assume that was all for Chet. So hello, everybody. Thanks for coming. Welcome to Talking Shop, which is kind of our fireside chat on the wonders of modding. My name is Nick Breckon. I am from Bethesda Softworks, and actually formerly from Shack News, if anybody you guys know. Yeah, Scary's QuakeColio. There you go. And I am joined by my friends from Valve and Bethesda. Joel Burgess from Bethesda Game Studios. Say
Nice
hello,
to be here,
Joel.
everybody.
Chet Faliszek from Valve Software. And Matt Scott, also from Valve.
Hey.
Yay! So our intention today is basically to cover all the spectrum of modding, and you know, both of these studios are you know, culturally very ingrained in supporting the mod community, and that's kind of why we thought it would be interesting to sort of cover you know, some of the things that we observe from our perspective as developers, but also touch on just you know, all spectrums of modding. So I just want to start off by saying you know, just an open question to the panel here. You know, what is it about modding and that makes you want to support it as a developer? You know, what gets you guys excited about the community? You know, when you sit down and say, all right, you know, we need to make these mod tools, why do you do it? You know, what makes it fun?
I mean, when you get down to it, it's sort of the heritage, I think, of a lot of us sort of in this generation of game developers. Because, I mean, when I was in high school, I was working in Duke Nukem and Half-Life 1 and building maps for these sorts of things. So for me, it's just a legacy thing that it's how I got started, it's how I learned a lot. And I just love the idea of bringing in another generation of people, giving them tools to learn on.
Yeah, exactly. I was the same way. Joel and I used to build maps together for like Quake and Doom. And if that's how we got started in the industry, we want to present that opportunity to everybody. And aside from that, modders make really cool stuff. Like for Left 4 Dead, we've had like Deathcraft, right? Like I could never do that at work. So it's neat seeing what other people do with our tools. And it makes our games a lot cooler.
Yeah, I mean, to that end, you know, Left 4 Dead 2 is made with a team of about 50 people. The minute we open up the game and give out the mod tools, we've just made, you know, 2 million at the start developers, and now I think we're at like 7 million developers out there if they're all using the tools. And that's just really cool because they're going to come up with really cool stuff. Like Matthew Lorday was a really good example of a guy who's making some maps. We really love some of the gameplay stuff he did where he's like, oh, I'm going to put a health kit up here, but I'm going to make it really dangerous to get to, so you're going to have to pay this price on it. And he just did things we didn't think to do. We ended up having a map having him make a map with us, which is Coldstream, and now he's actually working at Arcane. And so it's like really cool watching someone come up from the community, because they have these great ideas, and it's not everyone in the community has to have a great idea, but everyone in the community probably has one good idea, and watching those come up, and you know, it's really fun.
What's Deathcraft?
It's Minecraft and Left 4 Dead 2.
Well, that's amazing.
It's
Blocky
in Left 4 Dead, or
characters.
is it in Minecraft?
Total replacement of all the models, all the art in Left 4 Dead 2 with Minecraft. It's awesome.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Yes.
Not so much building, but a lot of killing.
So you guys were sort of touching on this just now, but I think you know, one of the aspects of modding that's so exciting for developers is that you get a lot of new talent from that, right? I mean, I remember talking to you guys when I was a journalist about modding in general, and just how many of you from Valve started out in the mod community. I mean, is that still the case? Are you still getting a healthy influx from, you know?
Well, I mean, it's not just the mod community, but also if you take a look at Portal came from a team from DigiPen, Power of the Paint guys, same idea as DigiPen. You know, we have Adam Foster, who's Minerva mod. So we're still getting a lot of modders and also kind of indie guys doing some really interesting stuff. Because the indie scene now is, you know, back in the day, everyone was just modding, and there wasn't really this vibrant indie scene. But these days, they've taken the indie scene to new heights and really expanded out what that is. And so there's a lot of interesting people working in that space who would also have been working on mods.
Right. It's sort of blended in a way now.
Yeah.
Yeah. These are more powerful tools like Unity that are essentially, getting closer to making just a mod. But for you, Joel, I mean, do you guys get a lot of applicants from mod teams?
Yeah, we do. I mean, Todd was on a panel earlier today, and he mentioned that anybody who's a design applicant for us, part of the process is, submitting a mod that you've worked on in Creation Kit or GEC or something like that. It's really beneficial for us to have the tools out there. And not only does it give us, the ability to see what people do and let people try our tools out, but it means that when those folks come on board, they understand, how things are structured and where to begin. So it helps take a lot of the burden off us just in pure training.
Let's talk about tools for a minute, because you're mentioning tools, and I think that's one of the things that has seen a lot of growth recently. Especially both of you guys. Or all three of us here. We've had experience releasing tools recently. So you guys with Portal 2 with the Puzzle Maker. What's that experience been like?
Well, so actually, we've released two tools that are really interesting. Is the Portal 2 Puzzle Maker, which is probably the simplest tool you can ever have to make maps. Just you jump in, you point, you drop stuff, and release the SFM, which is probably the most complex tool you could ever have because it's super powerful to make movies. And so it's been interesting watching those two communities both go. The Portal 2 level editor, and then really it's just not the level editor, you can't look at that alone, you have to look at the workshop, because it was the integration with the workshop, changed Portal 2. Before we released those tools, about 6% of all the maps played were community-created maps. After the tool, about 60% of all the maps played were community-created maps. We went from 300 sessions to 2 million. So it's not only were they playing more, and that actually means they're playing more Valve maps because of the bigger numbers, but they're also just playing more of their own stuff. And so it's just really easy to see and look at that graph and go, wow, this is a total win. Not just for us of getting to sell more copies of Portal 2 and having more people play, but for the community itself of getting to play more.
Mm-hmm. And as games get more difficult or more complex, right, making maps is a million times harder, right? Like making a Portal 2 map was very, very difficult, and that's why before the map maker was released, we weren't seeing as many by far like community maps. And so by lowering the barrier to entry, we're seeing a lot more community maps, and a lot more of our players are jumping in there, seeing how things go together, and they're actually getting to experience a little bit of game development, and that's been a huge win.
Mm-hmm. It's not just that either, but the Puzzle Maker I find extremely interesting because, like, when I first got a build of that thing, it was the best game I was playing at that time. I mean, I would just hop in the Puzzle Maker and make stuff. And as somebody who does level design professionally, right, I had made maps for Portal 2, like in the Alien Swarm editor, right after, like I'd had to hack the Alien Swarm editor to make maps in Portal 2. And there was so much of an onus on you as a designer to have a great idea, to get over the technical overhead so that it was, because by the time you could actually play your map, you'd already put 5 or 10 hours just into building that map. With the Puzzle Maker, I could hop in with no idea whatsoever and just play with the tool, and I would be getting ideas as I was working and then end up going off in these other directions. And creatively, I thought that was really powerful. I don't even know how we leverage that as a development tool yet, but I'm really interested in looking into that.
It's got to be interesting for you guys because, I mean, you are releasing these tools and seeing people make Portal levels just that fast. Are you noticing, design decisions that modders are doing and going, oh my God, like why didn't we do that? Or is it interesting just seeing that rapid iteration?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some really interesting stuff people do in that space. One of the things you'll see is they often go for harder maps because they want more difficult puzzles where we have a limitation of you don't want someone not to experience your game because they get stuck in a puzzle. And so here they'll not quite have the ramp up to their map, and so they'll kind of challenge each other that way. And so that's been interesting to see some real head scratchers there.
Well, that's the great thing about modding is that you see things that you wouldn't see in a shipped game sometimes, right? I mean, and that's what's great about it.
I mean, there's a whole different set of constraints on you when you're making, something that you're going to ship. There's a certain level of polish. There's themes, consistency of themes within the game. And so there are a lot of ideas that occur to us that we can't follow through on. And it's really great to see modders pick up that torch. I mean, particularly in a game like Skyrim, there are actually a good number of things in the game which are sort of incomplete ideas that we didn't have the ability to start on that just might be something tucked away in a corner here and there that we kind of hope that modders will take and flesh out. Like the Dragon Priest mask thing. You know, the area where you first find that thing in Skyrim, I always intended to make that a player house, and I just didn't have time to do it. And that's one of the first workshop mods I saw go up, and that's really gratifying to us. In fact, I even have a lot of script comments that I put in and say, hey, if you're a modder, and I suggest them like, and comment this thing and try and figure out this problem. And it's really awesome as a developer to have that community out there to explore ideas that you maybe weren't able to, or maybe didn't even think of.
It's becoming really collaborative.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, and the cool thing with the Skyrim was, so I played Skyrim when it first came out, like everyone else, played it a ton, kind of put it away for a little bit, and then when the workshop came out, I came back to it, and I'm like, I understand there's a bunch of design decisions you made, because overall, you're doing this large audience, and so your design has to encompass all of the different choices and way people play the game. But I played it in a very specific way, and I want a very specific experience out of it. I can go through and just check all the mods that I want that are going to deliver that experience to me. And so my experience now of playing Skyrim is way different than the first time I played it, and it's perfectly tailored for me. And there's no way you could have delivered that to me. Yeah. So it's just awesome.
I mean, even just skimming the workshop, like, an hour ago, just to see what was currently on the most popular, there are very specific things. I think there was a mod called Necromancy Plus, and it's just a very deep dive onto that set of spells to legitimize that playstyle. And it's great, too, because there's so many different facets. If somebody wants to mod for Skyrim, they can write books, or they can write scenes and dialogue and quests, or they can make a space. And there's all these different avenues that if you care about a lot, you can just dive into that in a tool. And then there are going to be other people who get that channel like the workshop or, the Nexus sites, anything like that, and get that stuff to them. And I think it's really powerful and community-based.
That's what I love about the workshop, because you'll see the really in-depth mods right next to, giant chicken mod.
Posh mud crabs.
Yeah.
Well, that's the great thing about the workshop, right? Is that you guys are moderators for the workshop now. So anything you guys think is cool, that's the first thing we're going to see. And so that's the beauty of it. Finding mods used to be such a pain. And now with the workshop, we're able to just go and say, 1,000 people like the posh mud crabs. I better check this out.
Yeah, it is. It's meaningful in a way that we've never actually had before, because you see that sort of communal voting of what they like the most, and there's all different algorithms that Workshop can do to drive stuff up to the top of the chart. And it's like, I always thought that was sort of a niche-y thing that I always kind of wanted to do, but didn't think was worth the time. And it turns out it probably was worth the time, because this mod has 100,000 subscribers, and something to look at.
Yeah, in the past you would see a lot of extremely popular mods, Rocket Arena, or it seems like communities would sort of coalesce around these large mods. But now it's almost like you said, Chet. It's everybody has their own experience. Is that just a general trend that you guys have seen? That's a lot of mid-sized kind of projects. Or?
Well, I think it definitely in Skyrim in the workshop, that was one of the hopes there is just discoverability. Because it's really hard to broadcast out of how do I know to go download this thing and I got to go do this. I mean, granted, DayZ is a great example of you can go through a lot of hoops and still play it. But that's a painful way to do it now, right? And it's really great that you can go on to some place, and not just the Steam Workshop, but any of the other different sites and see, this is a really easy way. Here's a bunch of people talking about it. I remember in the very, very first, back in Doom and Quake days, of just having to hunt through forums and websites, and is so arcane of trying to piece together things to understand it, where letting everyone else in the community help you understand that and filter through that is just a really great thing.
I mean, what's great about that is it hasn't taken away from the more hardcore stuff like DayZ, where it is difficult to get that installed and running, But we've added this layer that was missing before of people who are interested in that sort of thing, but weren't able to deal with those hoops. And it can be a bridge to let them actually get down to the more complex stuff, which is going to be a little more esoteric and strange. And it's also bridged out into regular games that don't even support mod tools directly, that have more of a community building focus. I mean, I play a bunch of Terraria, right, with friends. I have 100 hours logged in Terraria. And I'll hop on a friend's server, and they've got all the tunnels and stuff that they've built, and I haven't played in 2 months, and I see that. It's all sort of the same thing where people are feeding back into it, all different levels of gaming, and that's really great to see.
Yeah. I mean, I remember, in high school, firing up Hammer and just being, trying to make my house or whatever, and just getting bogged down, and and I gave it up. And now, like you said, there's that stepping stone that with these tools.
Yeah, that's like the Portal 2 map maker, right, is the perfect solution for that. Or not a perfect solution, because it's perfect for building test chambers, but it's definitely showed us that we need to simplify our tools, because people aren't building the complex mods that they used to, like Rocket Arena, or bringing a new game mode like Capture the Flag, right? So yeah, that's a huge focus for us, is kind of simplifying things, and that's where as developers we kind of need to go, right? Because as our games get more complex, it's harder for us to develop. And then if you guys want to do something, it's even more complex because I get paid to use those tools day in, day out. So I'm going to learn them. But if I want you to build something, you need a lot of free time, like Chet was talking about in his earlier panel.
And that's one of the things that I think has been a good guiding light for us as developers, because releasing mod tools is just such a part of our culture. It's just something that we always assume we're going to do. It means that it's harder to make those little shortcuts in development where you're going to, well, this thing is kind of edge casey, and I don't need to document it, or I don't need it to really work in a great way. But there's always somebody at Bethesda who's saying, well, think of the modder, and is a modder ever going to figure out how to do this workflow without you sitting in his, in his office talking to him about how to do it? And so we try and make all of our tools a little bit friendlier and a little bit easier to use, even though this creation kit is a really complex thing. It's nowhere near the puzzle maker, right? But it keeps us from going off the tracks and making something that's really just focused on only what we make. And that just helps us in the future, too, by keeping us honest during development.
Here's a question. How is that process of making tools for the community influencing the way that you think about making tools for your own teams? Is it when you're sitting down making the creation kit, is that something that a decision you're making for the mod community? Does that feature ever get sort of worked into your own tool set?
I mean, it does. And again, for us, it's because we know that we want to release mod tools, whenever possible, however possible, we want to release them. And just by sort of having that like looming over us, we don't go down routes where we know that it's going to make life more difficult. I mean, I know for us, just doing like, expansion and downloadable content stuff, the fact that our tools are mod friendly also makes them expansion friendly for us too. And it could have been very well the case that we would get to the end of a project that, say something that wasn't built upon legacy, like, Fallout 3 and Skyrim where you're making a tool specifically to launch a game. And you get to the end, you might not know that you wanted to do expansion content. Maybe the game did better than you thought, but your programmers are going to tell you, well, no, it won't work. We can't put anything more in. It's a struggle we face all the time. So having that mod sensibility makes it easier to cross those bridges when we do get to them, and they can be tough to cross.
How about you guys?
Yeah, that specific thing is something that's come back to bite us pretty hard in Left 4 Dead, for instance, right? Like we ended up for Left 4 Dead, it had to live in a separate code branch, right? And because of that, we can't easily inherit the features of, say, the TF shop or the Steam Workshop. And so that's something going forward, we're always looking at that as we're building new projects and stuff. It's like, okay, how easy is it going to be for us to make content? Because the easier we make it for you, the easier it's going to be for us. It shouldn't scare us to go make a house in Hammer, right? And right now it does. It kind of sucks. But yeah, like...
Well, so the Portal 2 tool is interesting, is Dave Sawyer ended up remaking Portal 2 pretty much in the tool with minor a couple of maps. But that was his test bed of like, can I remake puzzles we've already made? And now that I can, boy, this would have been a lot easier to make them this way than the old way, even for us internally. So that was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, the trick with that would be, as a development tool, figuring out a way that you can make a tool as approachable as a puzzle maker while you're still figuring out what the game is. Because with Portal 2, it's a very known quantity. And that's one of the beautiful things about modding in general is you're working with a known thing. Like versus cracking open Unity or the UDK or something and trying to make something from scratch, you have themes and fiction and functionality that you know works. But do we ever get to a point where we can make a development tool which works like that?
Yeah, I think the problem is when you have that beginning development tool, you don't want to restrict yourself based on the tool. You want to restrict yourself based on your ideas. And we never would have thought to put all the crazy stuff that we ended up putting in the game if we were using the tool to start with. So, yeah, that's important.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know how many of you were in the last panel about Looking Glass, but Tom Leonard, the AI programmer for that, had a good story of how he had to go back and once they kind of understood the game and they were about to ship, he rewrote the AI 3 weeks before shipping, or no, he did it in 3 weeks. So that's the thing with the Portal 2 map editor. Like Chet was saying, we didn't know, like we didn't fully understand what Portal was till it was pretty much done and shipped. Right. So like once you understand the game you're trying to make, then you could go build a tool that's useful for that, right?
It's just one of those really interesting questions that I don't know that any of us have the answer to. Maybe somebody will figure it out. That the existence of something too like the puzzle maker opens it up, right? Like how can we actually do something that's that easy to use earlier in the cycle so that we can actually iterate. And because again, it was the thing I was talking about earlier, the creative juices, the difference in how I approached map building when I was in the Puzzle Maker versus something, especially an editor that I'm not comfortable with, completely different creative experience and a really rewarding one.
Yeah, it just comes down to your iteration time. The faster you can iterate, the better a game. Like the more thoughts, the more ideas you can experience or experiment with, right? And so getting that iteration time, I think, is the key.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we do at Bethesda when it comes to actually like building dungeons and that sort of thing is we have this multi-stage iterative process. And part of this is just because we have such big games, and a level designer in a, say, a Call of Duty sort of game might have 2 or 3 maps that they work on for 6 months. And a level designer on, I think one of the level designers on Skyrim had 40 dungeons he was responsible for, and he had a bunch of other responsibilities in addition to that. And that iteration, right, what we do is we chunk our iterations into passes. So we'll have like a layout iteration that's focused on that, and then you might not see that dungeon again for 2, 3, 4 months, and then you'll do an encounter iteration, and you're going to do an optimization iteration, you're going to do a polish iteration. And what we found is our iteration time, the lapse between it, is really broad, but that lets you get away from it, check out, and learn more about what you want to do. And it also gives the game time to catch up, right? So that way, we're able to figure out what's cool about the game and fun and get it on screen and still have iterations ahead of us and spaces that we haven't finished yet, and then learn from those lessons and get them in the game earlier. And it's a constant struggle because you only ever figure out what's great about the game after you've played it for a little bit.
Speaking of iteration, I think one thing we should touch on before we run out of time here is just advice for modders. I mean, we're talking about all these tools that are really easy to use, but you see a lot of mod teams. They get together, they have really cool ideas, and then nothing ever really happens. And I've been through that experience, right? Talking to people who want to get started with modding, what are some basic sort of fundamental tips that you would maybe give to modders? Should they be working in a team? Should they just try anything? What's the...
Well, so I think the cool thing now is you have a lot of options. Before, you kind of had to have a complete thought you were going to do. But now, if you want to go out and you want to make some items for TF2 or Dota, you can. If you want to make a small experience change in Skyrim, you can. You can kind of scale what you want to do. But in all of that, it's about releasing, getting feedback, and iterating. So there's a bunch of mods that have really nice websites. They don't have the mod out. Don't worry about that stuff. Worry about the content. Worry about releasing it, getting feedback, learning how to understand feedback, because yes, it's the internet. There's going to be a bunch of people tell you suck. That's okay. You have to decipher what out of that is important, what do you want to take back, and what do you want to use to build it in. Because even all those people saying that, there's going to be a bunch of people saying it's great. There's going to be a bunch of people saying, I like this or that. You have to decide. You have to decide how to use that feedback and work it back into the project, because their feedback will make it better.
And it's just like any other skill, right? The more you practice, like the more you're making mods, making models, anything like that, the better you're going to get at it. And if you never start, you're just not going to get better. So definitely try it. Like, that would be my advice: is just jump in and keep jumping in as much as you can.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to wait for just the right idea. You need to start something, and then that's how you're going to learn.
Yeah, we call that sharpening your pencil. Don't keep sharpening your pencil getting ready to write. Just start writing. Don't worry. Right. It's okay. It's a dull pencil.
Yeah,
you'll get through it.
But one specific piece of advice I think would help a lot of people. Like, it's definitely one thing that I only kind of found out by bouncing around and doing it, is it's much better if you're just starting out and if you're interested in development to sort of get to an intermediate level in several tools as opposed to get really expert at one. And it's a lot like learning to program, where if you bounce around and you learn a few different languages, you learn what kind of concepts and problems are common to programming. But by learning different languages and different syntaxes, you learn what sort of things are peculiar to a certain language. And it's the same thing with editors. If you use UDK for a little bit and you learn to build a map in that, and you use something like QuakeCon, which is fundamentally very different in terms of, like, there's no BSP editing, there's no in-editor primitives, but you learn that, well, we have to solve triggers, in a way, and we have to solve pathfinding and optimization, and some of these things are similar. You're going to learn more about the nuts and bolts of game development rather than a particular tool. And that's just going to make you learn much faster, and it's going to make you more valuable to any team that you contribute to, whether it's a mod team or a professional game dev team or an indie project that you want to do with your friends.
One thing I might add is just that the idea of how small a mod could be. It seems like people think about mods in the classic sense still, and you know, you've got to do this crazy total conversion, but that's not really the case, especially with Workshop. You see all these, you know, extremely minor tweaks to a game that add a lot and are worthwhile.
I mean, I think the first mod to go up on Workshop, and it was a first because it was from our production director, Ashley, was Skyrim loading screens from your mom. And, of course, Ashley had the inside loop. He knew when we were going live.
Right.
But it was just, you know, loading screens are just an item. They're an object that you can edit. And so he dropped in, like, maybe 3 or 4 loading screens that would randomly show up, which, like, hey, did you clean your room? Do you need to go outside? Very small, specific, you know, whatever you're interested in. You can sort of turn that knob and send it out. And, you know, you might be surprised the kind of ripple effect it can have on your experience and other people's.
I mean, definitely something with Skyrim, where there's so many people playing it, you don't need to have every single person play your mod. It could be something very specific for you, very tailored for you, that you enjoy, and you're going to find out that you're not alone there, that there's a bunch of other people that enjoy that as well.
I mean, I think one of the sort of the quiet tragedies of mods is that a lot of people make mods that they never distribute. You know, I just wanted a house outside of Balmora in Morrowind, and I made my little hut up on the hill outside, and I never uploaded that anywhere. I just wanted to learn that tool a little bit and made it, you know. And stuff like the Workshop, it's a button in the editor, and I don't know how other games are doing it on Workshop, but I hope it's integrated as well, because it's one of those things you might think, well, nobody's going to want this, but you know, you never know. And you can throw it up there, and you're going to make somebody else's life, you know, just a little bit better.
Let's talk about the Workshop a little bit. I mean, you know, this is obviously, it keeps coming up, but you guys, you know, basically launched this. I mean, the reason that all of you guys are up here today is that you collaborated on the Skyrim Workshop. And so what was that process like? And just in general, you know, what was the genesis of the Workshop itself?
Well, I would say the genesis was that one of our designers, David Sawyer, he loves Oblivion. He loves your games, right? Like, and he doesn't like playing he doesn't like going back to Oblivion. Like, he has all these memories, and they were of Oblivion plus a million mods. And he's like, oh crap, I don't want to have to go back and reinstall all that stuff, because like installing mods can take forever. So he's like, okay, how can we simplify this? And then other designers got on board, and we were like, okay, we need to remove the installation barrier, and we need to make mods more accessible for new people. We need to make it easier for them to find it. And then so Sawyer got with Joel, I think, and then they started going off on Skyrim.
I mean, that was a great thing about a guy like Sawyer, right? Because it was a sort of idea that aligned with what Valve was doing anyway. Stuff that I would have never known or really been privy to. And it wasn't as if, like, you know, some suit at Valve, like, had this idea and needed to push this directive forward. It was a guy who knew more about the mod community than I did, right? And he came, and, you know, Matt and I know each other from back in, you know, high school, and he just was able to put the two of us together, and Dave talked about the ideas that he had, and it was great for us because, of course, we were planning to do mod tools, and it just all snowballed from there. But the difference was that it was something that was really integrated and really paid attention to what problems people were having and just enriched the experience, made it better for everybody, you know. It didn't take away from the modding scene that's out there now at all. It just expanded upon it.
Yeah, and I mean, the original impetus for the Workshop itself was just, games are really expensive to make. They take a lot of people and a lot of time. And as we're going to keep growing a game like TF2, where are you going to get the new content from? Sure, Valve can be producing some content as well, but you know what? You could look to the community and you see these really cool things being made. Wow, if that guy's making this and his friends are running on his server, it'd be really cool if more people got to play that, if more people got involved in that. And you know what? He should get rewarded for the time he spent working on that. So you know what? He's going to get a piece of each sale. And we have people who are actually making a living just working on TF2 and Dota mods. And that's really cool that they get to do that. I mean, we launched the Dota 2 store launch with 80% of the content made by the community.
Wow.
And to us, that's this really cool thing of, you know what, that's letting the community feed the community. And it isn't like this relationship where they're not getting something out of it. The players are getting all this new content and all this cool stuff. And the people creating that content are actually being rewarded monetarily, so that their time that they spent making that is worth something. And that's just a really cool relationship to be able to foster.
Yeah, so if we have a theme today, it almost seems like a real blending of traditional developers and the mod community.
Well, I mean, the gaming community has gone past this niche little group of guys or whatever, like you want to say it was. I don't even know if it ever was just, the lone guy playing alone in his room, where you play something like Left 4 Dead and, you're jumping on and there's 40-year-old women you're playing with as well. And so it's this really great thing of leveraging, or there's all these bad words for these kind of things, right? Like leveraging or taking advantage of. But it's really making sure that not only are they consuming the game, but they have an ability to push back into the game. And when they push back into the game, you want to make sure that they're not doing this in this singular experience, but they're doing it into this group. So this group can play it and have it and see it and be all excited about it. I mean, there's a really great community around when we have new maps come out in Left 4 Dead 2, and you'll see, we'll feature one, people will play it, and the feedback that those people get from that is this really great loop. And you always want to just foster that and have that keep growing like that, because the community that plays games now is so big, so diverse, and just so skilled and so creative that it'd be silly not to have them feed back into that system.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to think a lot as somebody who modded a bunch and then got in the industry about what's the difference between a modder and developer. And I think now more than ever, there isn't that great of a difference. I mean, the indie scene of today has sort of replaced segments of the mod community because, frankly, there just aren't as many games that are mod-friendly anymore. And I think indie has kind of risen up into that and not supplanted it, but fleshed out that area. And it really shows you that, like, what a game developer is just anyone who's interested in making games. I mean, there are tools for making interactive fiction and for making small games and big games and 3D games and 2D games. And mods are just a part of that puzzle for people to just express themselves in a way that's bigger and more inclusive than ever before. And I think that's really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, and to that end, so we're gonna have Greenlight coming up on the Steam Workshop, so that the community itself can go out to the not the modders, but to the indie guys and say, hey, this is a really great game. You guys should put this up on Steam. More people should get to see this. And all of that, and the workshop itself lends it to the old age question of how do I get into the game? How do I get into the game industry? Right? To get in the game industry, I don't know. How to make games, I do know. Just make a game. Make a mod, make an item for TF2, open up the Skyrim editor, have some fun in there, make something cool, release it, get feedback, keep growing that way. It's easy to make games. Again, getting into the game industry where you're, I don't know, that's like some other weird beast these days, right? But like just actually making games, just go make games. Go post it up somewhere, get the feedback on it, make a mod, make an item, make an experience. It's really the best time ever to be out there doing that.
Yes, it's the sharpening your pencil thing. I mean, at some point, you just have to do it. Just get started. Because, man, what is that quote? I'm never going to think of it, so let's.
I know exactly what you're talking about, but I won't think of it either. Yeah, we know it.
We know it, but you guys will figure it out later.
Well, so someone asked me at GDC, how to get in the game, how to make games, and I'm like, if you're asking me that, you're probably not going to, because you should just be doing it.
You should be doing it.
It's true.
But that's the thing, it's just nothing stopping you, right? I mean, I remember when I was on a TI-83 calculator in calculus class, which I didn't do well in, by the way. I wrote like little interactive fiction things with dice rolling mechanics to kill monsters, and that was a pain. But like, I had a friend who was just interested in making like interactive fiction. I found this tool called Twine, and Twine is what I wanted when I was like in 11th grade trying to, figure out the TI-83 to make interactive fiction. You can just do it. Like now more than ever, you can do it. You can get started. And the first things you make, Ira Glass. It's an Ira Glass quote.
Oh yeah.
But you're gonna make junk, right? It's that quote about your taste is what makes you great, and you're going to keep coming back to it. And you're going to make just junk. You're going to make piles and piles and piles of trash, and you can't get discouraged by that, because eventually you're going to make something that lives up to your standards. And hopefully, somewhere in there, you're going to lift up someone else's standards, and you're going to find whatever success it is that's meaningful to you.
Yeah. Because I mean, especially right now in the game industry or making games. No one has to give you access. There's no key. There's nobody holding you back. There's nothing you have to unlock. You just have to start doing it, and that is the hardest thing to do. But it's seriously, right? There's no rite of passage that you have to do. There's no one who has to give you permission to make a game. Just make a game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's one of those things you hear from a lot of people who go through school. Is there are programs, and there are excellent programs for game development now out there, but almost to a person, any graduate of development program that I talk to, it's the things that they did on the side. Right? It's a group of projects that they did as part of a class, or maybe a little tangential of a class. That's what they really learn from. And that's really where you're going to demonstrate your passion and find out what you care about outside of the parameters of other people. So just do it. Just get started.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a misconception that, modding is easy. And even if you have those easy tools, it's still, you still have to think. You've got to put some work into it, right?
Yeah, it takes that initial idea, and it's where something like the Skyrim creation kit is great, because you can start with a very simple idea of let's put top hats on crabs, right? And then you would do it, and it's like, all right, that's done. Let's move along, right? And you just have to do that more and more. Even like when we're making Left 4 Dead, or I'm sure Skyrim was like that, but I'm not going to say you guys did this in Skyrim, but Left 4 Dead, I mean, it just sucks for a while. We're making nothing but junk. And it's iterating on that. It's going through and reworking it that makes it better, like these guys are saying.
Yeah, I mean, iteration is just so important to it, because one of the core differences between developing a game and modding a game is that you don't know what the game is or what's really effective about the game. And you just got to get something on screen as fast as possible and figure it out. But it still does apply to any individual piece of content you're making in a mod, just on a smaller scale, where you need to get something playable and just do it. And it's okay that it's going to be junk for a little while, because you're still going to work at it, and you still got that germ of an idea that is going to drive it.
Getting back to the workshop, I mean, have you guys been surprised by anything that you've seen since launching it? I mean, obviously you're getting tons of data, and you're seeing how the community is reacting to everything. What's that experience been like? What are you thinking about lately?
I mean, I think it was interesting finding out that people are making a better living making hats than they were at their other game job. Yeah. And seeing that happen. I think I was looking at the Portal 2 stats, and something like 8 million maps have been downloaded. Or 8 million downloads of maps. There's not been 8 million maps. There's like 160,000 maps. But it's still this enormous number. There's 160,000 maps out there. Go. Start playing them. Solve them all. We should have a new achievement. Solve every single map in the workshop.
Finish the internet.
Yeah, it's crazy, because the biggest thing I've learned about the Steam Workshop is I just need to get used to surprises every day, because, there's going to be something on there, or something shoots up in popularity out of nowhere that's just like, oh, that's cool. Wish I would have thought of that,
Yeah, I mean, the proliferation of mods just for Skyrim, it really quickly went from the sorts of things you'd expect, right? Skill tweaks, player housing, weapon sets, and a lot of that
over-encumbrance.
Yeah, that was one of the first. But then you got into stuff that was a little harder to find. And for me, the example of a mod that I think is really successful in terms of if you're trying to impress a developer is when I don't know how you did it, right? And there's a lot of that on Workshop that I just have to scratch my head for a minute and think about how did they accomplish that? Maybe I tried that and it didn't work out very well.
Yeah, the Tower Defense mod comes to mind.
That one, yeah. That's really impressive. It's all menu-driven, too, and the menu system is not really great to work with. Excellent.
There's a lot of crazy stuff out there. Well, we've got about 20 minutes left, maybe a little less than that. So, maybe we should open up to the crowd for questions. It seems like this would be a good panel for questions. So I don't know if we have my fellow coworker Matt Grandstaff's going to take your questions. So if anybody has any questions for the panel, anything about modding, advice, tools.
Just step back.
Fashion advice. Yeah. Chet's looking very fashionable.
Beard growing advice.
I have nothing to offer there.
It's easy, don't shave.
That doesn't work for me, man.
It doesn't work for me.
For men, it will.
Damn it.
Okay, I think we're ready.
Can I ask two? They're quick ones.
I think sure.
Okay. Earlier, Chet had mentioned that it's good to just get stuff out as far as mod content goes. Would you consider Black Mesa Source to be a good example of that, or is there a chance that Valve is collaborating with them on a deeper level?
We're not collaborating with them. They're working at their own pace and their own speed. I think their goal is to release it like a finished product, and there's good reasons to do that as well. And that's just their choice they're making on that.
Okay. The other one is, as developers, you're no doubt attached emotionally to your assets somewhat. You just recently released Source Filmmaker, and I guess it's been happening to a degree with Gary's mod as well. How does it make you guys feel to see your assets doing horrible, tasteless things?
The coolest thing I saw last week was the Portal 2 bot in GTA. Did you guys see that?
Oh, I saw that. That was amazing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That just makes me happy. That's like seeing a friend out there. Like that's his vacation photos for me.
That's a really good point. It totally feels like that, yeah.
I mean, there's a distinction to me too, and if there are any of the artists at Bethesda watching, you guys know what I'm about to say, but there's a distinction between how an artist will react, because to them I'm sure it's horrific, but that's my job, right? I love taking the assets in the game and combining them in different ways, and did you know that an upside down house makes a really good car tunnel? I mean, you can just turn it that way. So it's also part of the creative feedback loop of just seeing what people will do with stuff. I mean, that flexibility is awesome, and if your assets support it, even better.
Cool. Thank you.
Hey, I've got a question for all of y'all. I just wanted to ask, you were talking about earlier how you would work on stuff but not really finish it, and you were hoping that the modders could finish it for you. Have you ever considered, for Skyrim, Left 4 Dead, Portal 2, to try and bring in the mods that the community had made into the actual game?
Well, we've kind of done that with custom campaigns for Left 4 Dead, right?
We're Coldstream. If you're a 360 user, it should be out today. Don't look at me. That was one. One of the things we find there, with the campaigns, is unless you have a 360 dev kit, you're not going to be able to do the work that's needed to release it there. But definitely, I think there's a lot of stuff. In fact, in Left 4 Dead 2, a lot of people, what are we doing next? We're going to release something that's our example of using some new tools we're going to release, and it's really to let the community flesh out and decide how they want to use those tools.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's something that we would definitely love to do. It's sort of a logistics problem for us in terms of we're actually a really small team, so all the effort that we put into mods does take away from our mainline development efforts. But we also, in the lead up to Steam Workshop, we worked very closely with a number of modders. There were about 3 dozen modders who worked very closely with us, testing the tool, getting their content ready and primed for Workshop, and telling us about what they needed and what was going to work best for them. And we definitely, we changed our mind on some things we were pretty set on based on the modder feedback. It's not the same as releasing content, of course, onto a console, but they're very much part of the process there. And the more we can do that, the better, because it just helps everybody.
Thank you.
I've been modding for a long time, and I'm a graphic designer. I'm also a full-time student going to school for game art and animation, and I've been working since Neverwinter Nights, and I love working on Bethesda and Valve titles like Portal and Morrowind, Fallout. Titles I ever seem to go back to, even whenever I don't have time to mod, are Left 4 Dead and Skyrim. And no matter what, I tend to love the mods that add to the immersion of the titles, like add HD textures, normals, bumps, better rigging for bones, post-processing effects, ambient lighting, all that kind of stuff, even sounds that make the game sound more realistic. What are some of your own favorite kind of mods to work with?
I like feature mods that add on to existing systems. So something that adds additional alchemical plants in the environment. You mentioned the dungeon sounds mods by a fellow by the moniker of Cliffworms. That stuff I find really adds a lot. I'm a little less interested in a go here, do this type of experience when I use mods. So what I actually will do is periodically I'll go to the workshop and I'll skim through a bunch of the mods there and I'll just subscribe to them. And then if I get a couple of hours where I feel like playing Skyrim, which, maybe a month away from that time, I just get sort of these little surprises. And the game has just expanded for me in ways that I didn't necessarily remember I'd even subscribed to. So I like those little touch things that add to it.
Yeah, for me, I'm a simple kind of guy. There was a mod that there was a custom campaign where they made a custom tank, and he was wearing a football helmet, right? So one of the things in this campaign, I think it was towards the end, you had to run across this football field, and at the end of the football field is this tank with the football helmet, throwing his stuff, go rah, and that was my most memorable moment.
You missed the best part of that campaign. You also get a big foam #1 finger that you get to beat zombies to death with.
On a quick side note,
Did that do very good damage?
Of course.
Okay, so.
On a quick side note, have you ever checked out the Incredible Hulk tank mod for Left 4 Dead? I know that's one of my favorites, just to mess with in the free time.
I haven't. I'll check it out.
Flaming Hulk zombie.
Yeah. Let's go. Thank you.
Hi, I was wondering if Steam Greenlight will that be open to like source mods, like Black Mesa Source or No Room in Hell or any other like popular mods out there that are total conversion?
I am not sure what the process will be on that. Obviously, there's some legal issues there and stuff. I mean, I definitely know we want to make it where we're not putting a barrier or judgment pre that. So, I think it's going to be interesting once it's opened up what people submit. I imagine they're going to submit Half-Life 3, and we will all laugh heartily at that. But, it's going to be interesting to see what people submit, and then we'll learn a lot from there. When we do things like the workshop or the green light or anything, it's always, we're iterative on it, and we learn and we keep advancing. You're going to see a lot of stuff coming up, like the SFM and how it pushes on the workshop and the communities, and how we really need to revamp those for that. And you'll see some stuff coming up from that. So, it'll grow from there.
I think my phone just buzzed. I got a Chet Faliszek announced Half-Life 3 at QuakeCon.
Drops the mic.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Somebody was talking about earlier about the Black Mesa mod, and maybe somebody was collaborating in Valve or, with Bethesda, ever collaborating with anybody. Have you guys ever reached out to a community member or a modding team or anything to make something for a game, or maybe collaborated with them on some level?
All the time. All the time. I always am emailing people if I see something cool, or if I see, for Left 4 Dead, we see a lot of fan-made live-action movies. I always send emails to those guys and stuff. It's just cool because, it's something that I've worked years on, and they're embracing and making into the new. It's not to build it too big, but they're making their generation's Dracula or something, right? It's their fiction of what zombies are or whatever. And so if they're going to advance that and play with that, oh hell yeah! And we've actually fixed bugs that weren't bugs, but helped somebody specific mod or something that they wanted to do in a campaign. And we'll always do that, yeah.
Yeah, there are a number of times that we've had modders reach out to us specifically for solutions to problems. We really try and be there for them on that sort of thing. And there have been a few times, too, where we've reached out to modders in the community that we thought were doing something really cool. And even if it's just to sort of validate their efforts, we think it's important to get a little crosstalk there.
Thanks.
Hello, I'm a student studying game design and programming, and I have a question for the Bethesda guys. How has seeing the various mods for Morrowind, Oblivion, and of course Skyrim, how has that helped you when you guys make maybe a new DLC or do Elder Scrolls game or whatever you work on? How do the mods really give you ideas what you want to actually integrate in the game?
But there are a number of little design debates that happen constantly throughout the process of development. And we have to make a decision one way or the other, right? One of the beautiful things about mods as a developer is you get to see somebody who disagreed with that decision and went the other way, and you get to see how that played out in reality. And sometimes it has influenced the game. One of the mods that we saw for Oblivion was, I think I'm mixing this up, I don't think this is a Deadly Reflexes mod, it might be a different one, but a mod that took bow combat and slowed it down so that you just did bigger bursts of damage, and it just totally changed the feel of bow combat. And it was definitely a mod that we talked about when we decided to change the sort of the direction design-wise of bows for Skyrim from Oblivion, where the bows draw slower and have a meatier feel, and it takes fewer arrows to take down an enemy in general. And so absolutely, that's just one anecdote of that.
Thank you very much.
Well, if there are no more questions, thanks everybody for coming. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah,
Thank you.